Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Two Old Sexperts. Today we talk support for dating and intimacy for people with disabilities. Joining Sharon and I today is Maddie Sell. Maddie is the Director of Behavior Support Services at the ARC of Center County. She received her Bachelor of Science degree in Psychology in 2009 from Penn State and her Master of Arts degree in Clinical Mental Health Counseling in 2018 from Wake Forest University. She is a National Certified Counselor, a Certified Clinical Trauma Professional, and is currently working towards her professional counseling license. In 2009, Maddie began working in human services as a direct support professional for Skills of Central PA and was promoted to behavior support specialist in 2010. In 2018, she was hired by the ARC of Center County to develop a behavior support services department for the agency. Maddie specializes in dual diagnosis, trauma-informed support, attachment issues, and promoting healthy relationships and sexuality. Maddie strongly advocates for the sexual autonomy of each person she supports through the completion of socio-sexual knowledge, capacity for consent, and sexual risk assessments, and providing sexuality education to the person, paid supporters, and families. Sharon and I welcome Maddie Sell to our program. Today's focus is supporting for dating and intimacy, but I don't want people to just be stuck on that idea. It's also about how do we support healthy sexuality in the face of we're constantly in the fires of trying to keep people from reoffending.
Tend to have the belief that if we did a better job at supporting healthy sexuality, we would have a lot less quote unquote inappropriate sexual behaviors.
Yeah, and I think about that so often that you almost wish that you started at this point of what is healthy sexuality, but we didn't. We started at here are people with disabilities of some sort, and prisons are getting full of them and they're hurting themselves or each other and whatever. But you're absolutely right. The more we do that's positive and supportive, the less we're going to have of the problematic issues, both in offending and harming themselves in some way or making other people uncomfortable.
It's never too late to start addressing it. Even if you have
Exactly.
someone who is labeled as an offender, sex offender. I worked for a pretty big nonprofit and we had a sex offender program in residential. And what we tried to do was constantly teach about healthy sexuality. So, Maddie, I'm curious to just kind of hear from you a little bit. What do you try to focus on whenever you're working with people who have quote unquote problematic sexual behaviors? And that, when I say quote, that can be such a huge thing.
Yeah. One of the pieces of this work that I really enjoy is working with the paid supporters and the families to understand. I feel that we kind of need to start there so that, the teams aren't scared. These issues tend to be, they're significant and they can, have a lot of negative outcomes. And so helping teams to have an understanding of why we're doing what we're doing, why we're providing this education, and so that, they can kind of check their own biases at the door and separate their own values from what we're trying to do for the person.
I think it's so true. Considering my age, there weren't even words when I was a kid. The only words that you heard, even about like this, people were sent away to institutions if they had a disability, or the family just didn't talk about it. And then we've evolved since then in so many ways. But I think families, and also we're all carrying our own culture and religion and trauma, our own histories with us. So we've got to look at ourselves. We really have to dig deep to figure out why we think and believe what we think about sexuality and people with disabilities and LGBTQ and all of that all together in a big package. And I think families want to, in an effort to protect, they often say, oh, let's not give them that information, because if you give it to them, they might want to do it, whatever it might be, but they're going to want to do it anyway because they're adults. So the more information they have, the better. But I think often it comes from a place of concern, but working with families and of course the direct support professionals that is absolutely key. They're the ones that are going to have to make decisions. The example I always give is say a group home and two people are caught doing something sexual. Caught, that's the word that is the indicator of where I'm going here. And the staff that catches them has to do something. They have to report that. And what usually ends up is one is identified as an offender and one a victim. And they're not. They're trying to figure it out, but there's no one there to help them figure it out. So they're sneaking up to the backyard or whatever it might be. I just think it's so sad that people get labeled as offenders when they're not. And and there are people who really are offending, and let's try to help them figure that out and to support them in a way that they will not get themselves into trouble, and not, well, mainly not to hurt another person. But working with families, I think, is absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. I mean, there should be groups. I mean, years ago, I ran a support group for LGBT kids. And after about a year into the group, I started another one for parents because, you needed to look at both sides of that.
We're seeing younger and younger people coming into the system too. I've seen kids who are still in high school, who aren't even 21 years of age, who are getting placed in residential. What has been your experience working with families and providers in terms of their openness to address these issues?
Well, it's about half and half. Some are very, very resistant, and some are very open to the conversation. And it's obviously tougher to work with the people who are resistant and helping them to understand. A lot of times, it's not necessarily just about, oh, yes, we want to encourage this person to have sex. Doing this work is also protective. Like you said, assessing for consent and the ability to consent is very protective, because just having a disability, at least in Pennsylvania, doesn't mean that you can't consent to sexual activity. And so, and a lot of people think that, a lot of parents think that, they think that because they're a parent of a person with a disability, that automatically means they're their guardian. Even if they are the guardian, they think that means they get to make that choice for them.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a really important point. I mean, I absolutely agree. I mean, there are some people who have guardians and don't need them, and others who may need some support and guidance along the way. And then there are the people, like several people that I've worked with, who were perfectly capable of giving consent and understood the whole everything, but their families, basically what they said was, you're retarded and you can't do this. This is not for you. And what they would say to me is, my family's all I have. I don't want to lose them. So they then make a decision not to have a full, decent life, which includes intimacy. And that's just very sad. But talking to people it's not easy. People that your starting point is that you're kind of different ends of the table, but the common denominator is the person that we're talking about, a whole person. And if we can both sides can, there shouldn't be sides, but oh Lord, we all know there are these days. But to find the common denominator and work toward it.
I'm always curious to hear from the people who join us some of your stories in terms of how have you supported people to really have meaningful relationships. It's hard as a neurotypical person to date and try to navigate relationships. I find it almost impossible and quite daunting and terrifying. How have you supported people to navigate one of the most complex issues in terms of dating, especially if they have a disability?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. For neurotypical folks, it is incredibly stressful. And we're now in 2022, and online dating is, I guess, the way to meet people, which is yes, and it's definitely, it's more difficult for folks to meet people, especially now with the pandemic. Everything kind of, shut down, and things are just starting to come back together. We actually, prior to the pandemic, my agency was thinking about how we could, in a very intentional way, start almost like a mixer event for people with disabilities, to have folks from all over our county, maybe even surrounding counties, come and just hang out and get to meet each other.
That's a really good idea. Years ago I did a speed dating for people, very similar. It wasn't a mixer, but we did speed dating, and those of us who were the professionals, we sort of stationed each area as they switched. And I look online at different resources, and there's even speed dating online for different groups of people, like LGBT or people over 50, single parents. I've seen maybe we need to consider joining forces
Yeah.
and doing something like that. My experience in running the speed dating, and we know this, the men tend to outweigh heavily in numbers the women. So you'd have like one woman for every 10 men, so the men were fighting for that woman. So, but this
Oh,
is where
goodness.
we need to get a little creative too.
I love the speed dating idea.
We can make something
I
happen.
really like your idea also of having people from the region, just getting together once a month or something and just have a mixer and have fun and dance and talk. And, I think that's lovely. That's really, we tried to do that with follow up with offenders, but get them together in support groups once a month. And it worked for a little while, but then people retired or switched jobs and it just kind of putzed out. It didn't continue. But I mean, I just think that that's a wonderful thing to do.
We come together with ideas. So years ago, we had different things that we did. We lost that because I think providers become somewhat territorial at times and think I have to keep everything in-house. I mean, our goal is to support people. So I think the mixer thing is a good idea.
Also, what we would love to do is have, a guys group and a girls group to actually work on, some education, talking about social skills and those sorts of things that are so important to know prior to going into a situation like that. We do a lot of that education, but then I think people don't have an opportunity to actually use what they've learned. We have day programs and we try to get people involved in Special Olympics and other activities, but often the pool of people in those groups is small, and so it would be fantastic if we were able to pull a larger group of people together in that really supportive way, to make that happen.
But it builds. We do, and you were involved in the group that we run each week,
Yeah.
where we're trying to teach critical skills to in terms of relationships and dating. And people forget, like they think that we're sort of, this matchmaker, and that's the group that we're running. But we're trying to teach people that you have to learn things like how do you compromise, how do you share, how do you have a conversation, how do you avoid
Mhm.
exploitation on the internet, catfishing. And then we try to get
Yeah.
people together once a month to try to implement the skills that we're trying to teach them. And it's slow going for sure, but we've opened that up to anyone who wants to attend as a resource, and I think we can be doing more of that also.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, maybe we should really talk to some of the providers and or the people in Harrisburg about, implementing some of this so it doesn't go away. It doesn't stop if people change jobs or whatever. It's just part of the programs that the people are running. I think that's so important. When I lived in California for a little bit and I did some work with an agency, and that's exactly what I did. I met, I was thinking it was once a week, but I think it was once every 2 weeks with a group of people, about 20 people, and they came from different agencies. And we just talked. And then we danced. I mean, half of it was dancing and having some music. And do you have any questions about life and boyfriends and girlfriends or your parents or how's it going? What's happening? And it was really wonderful. And how do you say no and still be friends? And it was great. It was just great. I'd love to see that happen on a regular basis here.
No, and learning to say no, I think, is a big thing. I've done a lot of work with young ladies on, safe versus risky behavior. And, we'll kind of lay out different scenarios and, put them, how far are they on the spectrum of risk? And the scenarios that say, saying no when somebody asks you for a naked picture of yourself, so many of the young ladies will put that as a risk. The saying no is a risk.
Yeah.
And because it's this worry that people are going to be mad at them,
Oh boy.
or that people aren't going to like them, aren't going to want to talk to them if
Exactly.
they don't say yes.
Yeah.
And we're so desperate for
Wow.
relationships. We're so desperate to be loved.
Absolutely.
See social media and the internet playing a role in some of these considerations also.
Well, it is it's quite an interesting thing to navigate for sure. I know that Shawn, you and I have you've shared a lot of resources with me related to dating sites specifically for people with disabilities, which are fantastic. The hard part is in rural areas like where I'm at, right smack in the middle of the state, there aren't a lot of people who are on those sites. And therefore, that shrinks the pool there. And so folks are getting on Facebook and on Instagram and meeting people, reaching out to people that maybe they know that they've seen through, another activity, or just reaching out to strangers that they search on Facebook. Oh, that person looks pretty, and I'm going to friend them, and I'm going to, start messaging with them, and have had a lot of folks be exploited financially due to that. And again, it's that I don't want to say no because I want this person to like me. So I'm going to send them this gift card or this money. And then, of course, once the person gets what they want, then they stop talking to them anyway.
Do you do any role playing around
Yes.
these issues?
Yes, we definitely have. It's tough sometimes with folks because I think that it's difficult when it's role play and it's conversation and it's not really what they're experiencing, because I think they think, oh yeah, this is what you say, but I hear you saying this. However, that's not what my reality is. And I think I've seen folks get exploited time and again because they just think, oh, this person, I can trust this person. I know this person. And without fail, they're kind of back into that same situation.
And often the other person is saying, I'm your friend and you can trust me, right?
Or,
and well, what do you
I
say
love
to that?
you. I want to be with you.
Exactly.
Like Shawn said, we are so desperate for connection and relationship, especially the folks that we support who often have so few unpaid relationships that are fulfilling. And so they're just trying to obtain that in any way that they can. And I think a lot of times why some of the work that we do directly fails is because they maybe have this information, but in the moment that desire for that connection just totally outweighs the knowledge that they have, and maybe impulsively make that choice, and then it ends up not being a very safe or healthy choice.
Yeah, and when I think about the internet, and we've talked about this before, I won't go into a lot of detail now, but people on the spectrum who have difficulty with relationships in general often end up online and end up in child pornography sites and get arrested. Jails have many people in there with disabilities charged with pornography or stalking, and that's what they see on TV. Now, the child stuff is different because what they don't understand is how a child gets hurt, because they're saying, I would never hurt a child, I'm just watching. But when you explain the process, then they understand that. But other people watch TV and they watch, somebody smiles at them, it's their girlfriend, and that's not reality. Talking about what they see and what is real and what's not.
I watched a Netflix holiday movie and it was an immediate like novel fairy tale romance. And I'm going, well, where the hell's mine? Like, I want this. She just appears, is looking out the window and smiling. Yeah, right. Where's that at?
Yeah.
It's not,
Their eyes locked.
Yeah, almost nothing that we see in the media is an accurate portrayal of how dating and relationships work. And unfortunately, that is what the people we support are seeing. Not only movies like that, but also, the dating shows like The Bachelor and Love is Blind and all of those things. And they don't understand, the editing that goes into that, and the fact that, I mean, it's a game, it's for entertainment, it's not real. But if that's all you know, that's what you think is real.
One of the things that I've started doing is creating profiles, social media profiles, and that's just scrolling through and taking screenshots of real ones and then scrolling, and they're real because I know these people, or creating fake ones. And I'll work with people to try to look at what I call quote unquote clues in the profile to determine if they're real. I've taught people how to search Google images to see if a picture is someone else's picture. I mean, I got a friend request from someone who looked quite sweet. I mean, it was nice eye candy. And here was a woman who was on the Great British Baking Show or whatever it is. You know, if you just really know how to look at
Yeah.
things, you can get clued in straight away as to whether or not this person is a catfisher or, you know, someone real
Yeah.
too.
People that just randomly send a friend request when you haven't met in real life,
Yeah.
often not real.
Yeah. I mean, when I get one from someone that I've known a long time and it says, "How you doing, Sharon?" I think, oh, can you please? And it's you just know that it's not the person. It's difficult for anybody. I think these days with technology changing so quickly and it's so complicated. And there is I don't know who, it's certainly not my idea, but there was a format that I used at one point where what is a friend and what do you do with a friend and what do you know about in order for someone to be your friend? What do you know about them? Do you know their a casual friend, do you know their birthday? Do you wave to them and say hi in the supermarket, the checkout person or the mailman? And a friend, maybe somebody that you work with or you see in church or synagogue or what have you. And then a good friend is someone you've been to their house, they've been to your house, you've done things together, you know when their birthday is, and you might hug them when you see them or pat them on the shoulder. And then you proceed down the line until it's your partner, intimate partner. And what do you do with that person? Do you touch each other's bodies? And Shawn, you do that with those dolls, the anatomically correct dolls. But I think that's a good way to look at it too, because like sometimes you'll say, "Do you have a boyfriend or girlfriend?" And the person will say yes. But well, what's their name? Oh, I don't know. I forgot. I mean, it's because there's someone that they like, and that's their boyfriend or girlfriend. But it's just a tiny smidgen of it, and they don't quite understand that unless we help them to get to that. What is that relationship? What can it be? What can't it be?
Or they know their name but nothing else about them, and they don't
Yeah,
really communicate a whole lot and haven't actually spent time together. Having
exactly.
that label of I have a boyfriend, I have a girlfriend, I think is also something that people want, not understanding what exactly that means to truly have a boyfriend or a girlfriend.
And then if you do have a boyfriend or girlfriend and things don't work out, what do you do then? And I mean, you don't want to not have someone in your life. So people often hang on longer than is healthy for them to do. But how can you help them to get through that and respect themselves rather than stay dependent on that person?
I have a lot of people who have been in very long term relationships, 10 plus years. To me, it appears very platonic. You know, they may hold hands, they may go to dinner once a month. Well, all of the men that I've supported in these relationships have offended at some point. They're matched with what I would consider more vulnerable people who are probably more comfortable with what I would consider more of a platonic relationship, even though they are dating and they consider boyfriend and girlfriend. How do you navigate those waters? And I know we do sexual consent screenings to see if a person has the skills that they need to safely navigate these relationships, but you have one person who's pushing, I want sex, and in the back of your head, these alarm bells are ringing, like they could really take advantage of a person. And trying to keep a balance of, well, we could really support them to navigate a sexual relationship. Any thoughts on that?
I tend to work with a lot of people who really want relationships, but don't actually have them. So I've not had that sort of an experience where there's, boyfriend wants this and girlfriend wants this, whichever way it goes. I've definitely had an experience with a young lady who the family was very naive about their understanding of her understanding of relationships and sexuality. And there were messages sent back and forth and Snapchat pictures sent back and forth between her and a boyfriend. And when the parents found out, then they're going to the boyfriend's parents and saying,
Yeah.
Your son is corrupting my daughter, and we're going to call the police if you don't get them to stop. And then the other parents are rightfully so very alarmed. Then we end up with restrictive plans because, oh my gosh, so and so is coercing so and so into sending pictures, when in reality, that's not what is happening at all. In this situation, I actually supported both people, but of course, neither of them knew it. And,
Yeah.
The teams didn't know it because of HIPAA. And so that was really difficult to navigate because I knew that this young lady was actively participating in sending these messages and sending pictures, trying to not only navigate that with her parents and help them to understand her understanding and what she's actually doing, but then also trying to help the parents of the young man to not take such extreme measures to reduce his ability to talk with her.
It's more concerning when a male is described as being more sexually aggressive or crossing those sexual boundaries.
Yeah.
It's a little more risky. I mean, if it's a female doing it, we know, we've worked enough in the court system, all of us here.
Mm-hmm.
Men get the book thrown at them when it comes to sexual stuff. Women tend to, and I'm not being sexist, this is just
No, it's
statistics to
true.
back it up. Women get away with a lot more and can sort of play, and I hate saying it, the victim when it comes to these situations.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And this young lady did because she didn't want to get in trouble with her parents. Ultimately, in this situation, it led to this young man being placed in a facility
Oh,
where he actually did not have the best supervision and was able to figure out how to circumvent staff and cameras and such, and ended up having intercourse with several different women on several different days, and then got slapped with the diagnosis of a sexual addiction.
oh boy.
I know a lot of guys who do
Yeah.
Yeah.
that, but they don't have to suffer that supervision.
I mean,
Uh,
I'm sure I'm from State College, so there are a lot of people who are maybe Penn State students that is their weekend,
exactly.
And I have a hard time when we put these expectations and these values on the people we support when there are neurotypical people who are their age doing the same thing.
Yes,
And it's not
exactly.
necessarily saying that those are the most healthy choices to make. But when folks are sending pictures back and forth on Snapchat, there are plenty of neurotypical 20-something people who do that. And the same with, the various sexual partners as well. And absolutely, we need to support people to make informed, healthy choices. But I think a lot of times we get really up in arms about that behavior and we jump to, oh, we need to restrict this stuff. We need to, really crack down on this. And it is protective. That's the intent behind it, but it ends up causing more harm than
Yeah.
good.
I'm wondering how many groups there are that, like what you were talking about, the, having these occasional get together groups. But other than being like a social group, groups that actually talk like we're talking, getting together with support staff, but people that we support, just talking about these very issues. And maybe 10 people, not a big, huge 50 people in a room, but maybe 10 people. Do we know anybody that does that?
No. These risk screenings that I'm doing, we talk about labels. Someone many years ago may have had an interaction with a child, oftentimes even when they were a minor, and they're labeled with pedophilic disorder. There are
Yeah.
plenty of neurotypicals who had experiences as children with other children, and they're not walking around being treated as a pedophile. I'm seeing people where they're at such high risk for being accused of things and have this terrible label that I feel like I have to have levels of supervision in place, not to protect them from doing something bad, but to protect them from being accused of something bad. Because
Yes.
we throw people in jail. That's what we do. We're warehousing them in
Yeah.
jail. It makes money.
Speaks to somebody, that we recently a case that we worked together on, Shawn, and unfortunately, because of race and ethnicity, those are the things that are going to trigger people to label that person an offender so much faster than if it were a white man.
This person, we see a lot of these people have a very childlike enthusiasm to them too, and we know that people who are like that often feel safer around children. Children are less discriminatory and more accepting.
Mm-hmm.
Plus there's this playfulness about people, so I would rather sit in the corner and swing with children and play with toys with children than I would to deal with adults who are mean and cruel. Quick to label that. We have to, I think, always have an eye on things and carefully watch, but these are people that they're going to get hammered in the system if there's just one slight slip up of any kind. And when I say slip up, it's
Exactly.
not even sexual. It's I go over and I tickle you because I'm a grown up.
Oh,
Absolutely. And this person is somebody who, I could be wrong, but I would not imagine that they would do anything in a sexual way toward children, or even toward an adult in public. That's not really their interest. It's just a matter of, if they, like Shawn said, tickling a certain part of the body, maybe their stomach or something like that, then that is what is going to get them slammed with charges.
tickling always was annoying to me when I would see even parents tickling their child when the child would say, "No, stop, stop," and they kept tickling, kept at it. That's, first of all, it's making the child submissive, and that's not okay. But it's teaching them exactly the wrong thing. But yeah, I mean, the whole race thing is a whole, just another layer of judgment that's thrown on people. Yeah, and once someone is labeled, I mean, you're right, Shawn, it could be something that happened 20 years ago, but the label is still there. Well, in the past that this guy has done A, B, or C. Well, but he's not doing it now. Hasn't for years, but people just don't do it. And the other thing we've talked about in the past too is, when you look at the past, there are some behaviors that come out of a person's own trauma as a child, and people don't look deep enough to find out what is the core of that behavior, and that's important as well.
The people that we support offend because they have been offended against as children.
Yep, yep,
Where the neurotypicals, it's because we get drunk or we get high and we lose our ability to problem solve and we become highly sexualized. That's why the neurotypical population offends, or the number one reason.
yeah,
And our folks don't have access typically to drugs and alcohol, so that's already eliminated.
yep,
So we have the
yep.
opportunity to work with people on their trauma. And Maddie, I know you do a lot of work in trauma. What's your experience been in addressing some of those issues to help move and propel people towards aspects of healthy relationships?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me think about that.
Sharon, do you have thoughts on
Well,
that?
yeah, I mean, I just, I think what flooded into my head was like three different things at the same time. And I'm probably repeating. I mean, one was a young man who was hurting other people for no reason. And it ended up that he had been terribly molested as a child by his stepfather and his uncle in the bathroom. And the stepfather would put his hand on this boy's shoulder and lead him into the bathroom. Anyone that touched him and his shoulder, or in any unexpected way, he just nailed them. But he never made the connection. But it was in his record because I read it and found it. But the staff, the people he was working with every day, didn't figure that out. And they kept saying he's hurting people for no reason. But when we actually got to when he described to me what happened to him as a child, and then I said, "Now tell me again what happened with, your staff whose nose he broke the week before." He said when he got home from work, this staff person put his hand on his shoulder and said, he wanted to take a shower, and he said, "Hurry up." And he nailed him. And then we talked about, you're a man now, you're not that child that was hurt and so scared, and Joe is not your stepfather. But like, nobody had that conversation with him, and he was hurting people. It wasn't just Joe that he hurt, it was other people.
How
I
do
have
we
a
use that?
similar situation with somebody I support who the narrative is this person just likes drama and they just like to make accusations against people for similar things, somebody bumping into them at the bus stop or asking them for a phone number. Then this person will say, so and so molested me or so and so raped me. And the supporters not understanding that that's coming from a place of that person's childhood trauma, and that it's not about this person isn't being malicious, they're not being manipulative. They have a lot going on that they're trying to process. And, we need to support them in that way rather than just blowing them off and just saying, no, that didn't happen.
It's often right there under our noses, but we don't see it.
I feel like people are so afraid to go to places that are obvious that we need to go to because they'll say, don't talk about it,
Yep.
it'll make things worse.
Or I don't want to talk about it because it makes me so uncomfortable because I'm never going to tell you, but this happened to me as a kid. So let's just not talk about it. And we're not going to get anywhere unless we do continue to talk about these things.
But then our bigger job is to support people to also find ways to talk about it. And it's not being a therapist, it's just paying attention and being in the moment with people too.
Teams are wanting me to come in with my magic wand and it's like, fix the person, make them stop doing this. And so often I tell people, well, this service is actually to help you to change your behavior so we can help the person change their behavior.
Exactly. I say the same thing when I go into a situation. I'm asked to help, and like I'll go in and fix it. But the bigger problem is not the person; it's everybody around the person that actually does know what to do, but they can't talk about it, or maybe they actually don't know what to do, but they just are afraid to figure it out, for their own personal reasons. So getting them to be able to open up, and that's hard because we've got people of all ages and all different social groups and religions, and and it's not, they're not getting big bucks to do this work. They're doing it because they care about people. But I think to open up those baggages and just let stuff out, and have a sense of humor while you're doing it, that really is a key to me if I'm working with staff, to do some exercises that just, how did you learn about sex? What messages did you get about sex as a kid? Well, within seconds, people are laughing because the messages were ridiculous. But then you talk about them and you find out that, so the person that you work with, who works nights and you work days and you know each other a little bit, had almost exactly the same feelings about someone. And, you can get that out in the open, and then it's a whole different scenario.
I can't tell you how many people look at me like I have 5 heads and they're like, so what you're trying to tell me is that if these two people want to have a sexual relationship, we need to support them as much as possible to do that. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And I get it. I mean, I grew up in a very religious household where we didn't talk about sex, aside from don't do that until you're married. That good old Catholic guilt. And when I started in this field, I couldn't even say the word penis without blushing,
and Shawn made me say a word on a program recently that was beyond penis.
I made you, yeah.
But you have to. I know. I always still laugh at that, but Maddie doesn't know that. But one of the exercises I do when I'm working with doing a class for adults, I do the anatomy and body parts and functions and every body part, and just take penis for example. But I say, what is this called? And somebody will say whatever, and I say, does anybody know another word for that? Because I don't. And if they say, I have to say it again, they say cock, like that's not a comfortable word for me, but I don't like pass out or anything. I say, right, that's another word. But if you have and what's another word? Someone else will throw something else out. But if you have a problem or a question about that body part, the word you should use is penis. But to get all that out in the open and laugh about it and say, yeah, well, there are some really weird words out there, but if you have a problem, this is the word you should use. And just have fun with it. And you can do that with staff too. They don't, like, who wants to say all those words? Most people don't.
listening to Sharon's story and just thinking about, I've been doing this for 13 years. I've obviously become a lot more comfortable, but thinking about, when we're talking about the vulva, and if somebody uses the term pussy for that,
Yes.
that thinking about that as you told that story, I was wanting to tell that anecdote, but also not wanting to say the word pussy, because that even to
Exactly.
me is an uncomfortable word for me.
And some of it is just so hilariously funny to me. And you learn, I'll tell you the one that I blew me away, and I think it's so hilariously funny. And it was at one of these trainings where I was clitoris, and somebody said, a little man in a boat. What? Well, that's what they said. And you got to just think about that. But yeah, I mean, it was hilariously funny.
I'm not getting it though.
Oh dear.
I'm not getting it either. I'm
A little
visually
man in a
not.
boat. It's the way the clit looks. And, like it kind of sits there.
Oh, like a canoe or something. I see. All right.
Yes. A
We're
little
gonna
man in
edit
a boat.
this.
Well, that be good. Yeah. But when they said that, it was my reaction at the training, like, what? And this was a training for staff. This wasn't a training for people, that we support. We support each other. But I mean, that was my response to, like, what? And then and I was like, oh, that is so hilariously funny. And it is. What a joy it is. I mean, for me to continue to do this work and, to meet people like you. I mean, it's so nice that I'm actually meeting you, and Shawn is beyond a joy to me. But the people that are out there that need help, and they want lives, real, deep, wonderful lives, and we can help them to get there. But it's like Sisyphus with the rock, it's an upward stride. Boy, it's worth every push for sure.
But I envision and I want to see bigger ways. Whether that's a road
Yeah,
show where, it's not one person doing the work and I'm this expert in this. It's all of us finding ways to work together
exactly.
to help the people that we're trying to support. So my wheels are always spinning. Of course we have to make money because we have to live and sustain, but I'm a firm believer
Yeah.
if you do the right thing, the money comes.
Well, I think that's true. Yeah.
There are so few people, at least that I know of, that have a passion for doing this particular work. And I think it would be fantastic if we could find a way to pull those people from across the state, pull them together, even meet once a quarter to just bounce ideas off of each other and
Oh, that's a great idea.
collaborate. I think that would be fantastic. And then not only that, but be able to know other resources and other people that can be pulled in to consult and help whenever a tough situation arises.
We have to be allies. And I see that in this field, people get very territorial about things. That's still a struggle that I have working with teams where I think they get intimidated having me come in and kind of look at things or feel like I'm scrutinizing things. And that it doesn't work then. I'm not here to take over
Yeah,
or tell you what to do. I'm here to amplify
right.
what I think might help this person and this team long term.
I've had a lot of those same experiences where, I come in and it's well, you're not here all the time. You don't have to deal with this all the time. You're just, coming in on your white horse and saying, let's do things differently, but you have no idea what this is like. It's not true. I've certainly worked my fair share of direct care, So I absolutely agree, Shawn, that people do get even interagency, sometimes people get really territorial depending on if it's like a residential department versus behavior support. It's weird how
It's a shame.
if we all just work together. Yeah, it is a shame. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's almost like all the information, everything that we talked about today needs to be shared on so many different levels, like, with the state, with agencies, with families, with direct support, and with the people with ID and DD and autism. But it's the same information that we're talking about and sharing. And I think once a month with like a representative of each of those groups or several would be wonderful. We'll have to look at that.
And I think it's just a matter of trying to identify them. And Sharon and I talked about it. It's not about us. Like, again, we're not these experts just doing this. It's about trying to find other people because we're not going to be around forever either. Let's sort of create our league. It's like an all-star league, sort of, who
Yeah.
we need to bring Pennsylvania back to a place where we're the forerunners because I feel like we've really fallen behind.
Well, I do too, because when I moved to California, I was thinking, oh, California, I can do some work out here and they'll be so far ahead of us. No, what we were doing in Pennsylvania was way ahead of California. So you move away and, I go off to the stars or whatever. I mean, who takes over? Like who does it? We need more people. We need more people that are committed to doing this. And I think there are a lot of people that will do it and are concerned and think about it a lot, but they're just not. Nobody's asked them to be part of a process.
Safer Options has been updated. It's been 20 years since Positive Approaches, and we get these
Yeah,
memos every single week about positive approaches or positive practices. And I'm going, for God's sake, we haven't updated anything in over 2 decades.
right.
I think that when we're talking about biases and values, it's also important for paid supporters and for families to recognize that it's not up to us to decide who the person dates, or if it's, even if we think it's a quote unquote bad idea, because I get that a lot where there will be two folks who maybe have their own challenges and they want to date each other, and the team has decided that isn't a good idea and we need to keep them apart as much as possible. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
When in the history of anything has "don't do that" ever worked, like, to stop somebody from actually doing that? I mean,
The more I hear don't, the more I will try.
Exactly. It's funny because I think I'm pretty calm and level, but don't ever tell me that I can't do something, because that's all it takes for me to do it. Every time we do this, I get more calm in my heart and I guess energized, to we've got to do more. And but there are people out there that have strong commitments and really do want to make a difference. And families, I mean, I just think that we've got to do. I don't mean better work, but I mean, I don't know any. There are families that say absolutely not. It's bad, it's terrible. But for the most part, I mean, we're part of families, and we can, we maybe that's one of the reasons I've been successful is because I'm older and I can say I've dealt with that and this is what I learned from it, or this is where I used to be. And then that happened and you just evolve.
because I am somewhat younger, I think that my suggestion of, oh, well, maybe we should just help them go to the store and buy some adult videos and some toys, and I think that comes off a little, it's a little much for people.
Yeah,
I don't lead with that, but um that's definitely something that I've done many times over.
me too.
People don't feel comfortable. Staff are like, I'm not going in there.
Yeah,
I'll go. Let's let's go.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. We talked about that on another program. And yeah, I mean, one man who was in the hospital because he was inserting things rectally and he almost died. And but nobody was doing anything. So when I met, I mean, it's a long thing. I won't go into it, but I said to the staff afterward, with his permission, this is what he's doing. And you know that there are items made for this purpose, right? And they were like, oh, yeah. I said, well, why didn't somebody go get one for him? Why didn't he go with him to an adult store? We didn't think we could. Well, if you don't, he could die. How about that? But that's the reality. People just don't think they can do it or they should do it or like it's bad. No, it's not bad.
And
Yeah.
yes, people will not take you so seriously because you are young, but you keep at it because you know what you're doing. And
Yeah, you really do, Maddie.
it doesn't matter how old you are. People may look at Sharon and say, I can't take Sharon seriously because she's too old. Or people may
Yeah.
look at me and say, I can't take Shawn seriously because of whatever reason. People are going to find reasons to try to not take something seriously, but just know you're doing the right thing and you're doing a good job. That's what matters. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Two Old Sexperts. Join us next time as attorney Kate Lovelace joins us to discuss when someone offends, when and how things can go wrong, and supporting people through the criminal justice system.